On the morning of the 18th of October in 1244, somewhere along the coast between Gaza and Ascalon, 30,000 men faced each other in battle. On the one hand, you had the combined forces of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the military orders, and their allies from Damascus, Homs, and Kerak. Opposing them was the army of Sultan Ayub of Egypt and their Khwarezmian Turkish allies. Now, traditionally placed near the village of Forbie, or Hirbi, the Battle of Forbie ultimately decided the fate of the Latin states in the Holy Land, ending the Kingdom of Jerusalem as a regional power and destroying its field army for the last time. Never again would the kingdom field an offensive army independent of crusader expeditions from the west. Now, before I delve into the battle properly, let me set the stage for you. After the end of the Lombard War in the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1243, the pro-imperial party, which supported Emperor Frederick II's policy of alliance with Egypt, lost influence over the foreign policy of the Crusader state. Now, the victors of the war, the baronial faction, which featured families such as the Ibelins, no, not Orlando Bloom. The Ibelins were nowhere near as heroic as they were featured in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, but they were a prominent family of the kingdom. The baronial faction also included the Templars, and these guys decided to pursue a policy of alliance with Damascus and the Syrian Ayyubids. Now, at this point in time, Saladin's previous Ayyubid dominion had been somewhat shattered in many different pieces. With Ayyub struggling to unify the rebellious and ambitious Syrian emirs of Homs, Kerak, and Damascus. Ayyubid politics at this point was an absolute mess, with emirates changing hands faster than the position of British Prime Minister. Now, I'd go into a little bit more detail regarding the Ayyubid politics, but that whole thing requires, its own video. It's ridiculous. They miss and match, they arrest each other, they throw each other in prison, they fight each other constantly, and the entire time, the Latins are just sat in Jerusalem going, well, they're not in Jerusalem at that point, in Acre going, well, I guess we can take advantage of this. So, tongue-in-cheek jokes, English, hello. Tongue-in-cheek jokes aside, by 1244, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was in an alliance with the Syrian Ayyubids. The Templars in particular were heavily invested in this partnership, ironically, and had attempted to take Gaza multiple times with Damascene forces. Surprise, surprise, they failed each time. Now, as for the rest of the military orders, let's just say that they weren't particular fans of the Templar approach, with both the Hospitallers and the Teutonic Knights being imperial supporters. It's no surprise that the Teutonic Knights were supporters of the German Emperor, because they were German. And so much so that they were so in deep with the imperial faction that during the War of the Lombards, when they attempted to take over the city of Acre, the Templars literally besieged the Hospitaller possessions in the city. Yeah, that should tell you everything you need to know about the Kingdom of Jerusalem at this point in time. But we should get back to Forbie, because the War of the Lombards, again, like the Ayyubid politics, can wait for another video. So, the Latins were particularly good at playing the various Ayyubids off against one another. Saladin would have been probably churning in his grave at this point because his 13th successors did not hold a candle to him. And by 1244, Jerusalem had been fully returned to the Latin kingdom, and the Crusader state was looking stronger than ever, basically recovering its military strength after the previous disaster at Hattin in 1187. So the Grand Master of the Temple at the time, Armand de Perigord, wrote west in July 1244, celebrating the fact that they had recovered Jerusalem and all the Muslims had been expelled from the city. And less than a month later, it was lost to the Latins permanently. So you can imagine how smug he'd been, writing west, and by the time his letter actually arrived there, he had to be like, sorry guys, I got a bit too excited, and it's gone again. And this time, he didn't really have much time to retract his statement, because he died pretty soon after being captured at Forbie. Quite unlucky, really. But then again, none of the military orders survived at Forbie. They did not have a good time. Their commanders, yep, I'll get on to that. So, Jerusalem's fallen. But who took it? Well, it wasn't the Egyptians, it wasn't the Syrians, it was in fact a group who had just turned up into the Holy Land like a storm, and they sacked basically every settlement of note in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, slaughtered everyone in Jerusalem itself, ransacked the Holy Sepulchre, murdered priests saying Mass, and made the newly arrived Patriarch of Jerusalem, Robert of Nantes, leg it back to Acre literally less than a month after being in the kingdom. The Khwarezmian Turks had arrived, and they weren't here to stay. Driven westward by the expansion of an even scarier group of people who like horses, the Mongols, the Khwarezmians were contacted by Ayyub of Egypt to form an alliance and invade the Latin kingdom. Now, historians debate whether this was actually caused by or the cause of the Latin-Syrian alliance. We can't really tell because everything happened so quickly in 1244, but either way, the Khwarezmians agreed, scared the living daylights out of the Latins and the Syrians, and then ended up encamping themselves outside of Gaza. So the Latins and the Syrians soon merged forces, with Emir al-Mansur of Homs invited to Acre and welcomed into the Templar headquarters. Now from Acre they leisurely marched to Ascalon and soon came upon the encamped Turkic invaders. Now the Khwarezmians called for aid from their Egyptian allies, and so the battle lines were drawn. So we start with a cast roll call. Because on the Latin side, we had Count Walter IV of Brienne as the overall army leader, and he was accompanied by the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Robert of Nantes, as already mentioned, the Constable of the Kingdom, Philip of Montfort, and the Templar Master, Armand de Perigord, the Hospitaller Master, William de Chateauneuf, probably butchered that, and the Syrian emirs, Al-Mansur and Homs, and An-Nasir Dawood of Karak. Now, it's important to mention that the Teutonic Order was also present at this battle, but their commander, Conrad of Nassau, he wasn't the Grand Master. The Grand Master had been elected in 1244, and he'd sailed west just before this had all happened to try and patch things up between Frederick II and the Pope, because they were having a bit of a tussle, which again requires a whole other video. The 13th century is a bit of a wild time. It's very interesting. So, on the Egyptian side, we also had a Mamluk general called Rukin al-Din Baybars al-Sahel. I've probably also butchered that pronunciation, please forgive me. But he's not the same Baybars as the one who became Sultan in 1260, although that Baybars did also try to claim credit for Forbie and try and use propaganda for it, but it's not him, different guy. And Berke Khan of the Khwarezmians. So, we've got the armies laid out, we've got the commanders. So the armies were both consisted of 3 divisions. We had 2 Latin and 1 Syrian, and then we had 2 Khwarezmian and 1 Egyptian. The Egyptians faced the feudal levy of the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Patriarch, and the military orders were in the centre of the Latin army with Walter IV, and they faced Khwarezmians, and the Syrians also faced Khwarezmians. So the stage is set. There was some minor skirmishing on the 17th of October, with the Latin knights charging the enemy lines, but these had little effect. But come the morning of the 18th, the real battle began. Both lines surged forward in one go and clashed with vigorous combat, and the centre fought to a standstill, with the military orders and Walter of Brienne opposing Berke Khan. Whilst the stalemate continued, both flanks broke. The Egyptians fled from the Latin knights and the Latin levy, and the Syrians were decimated by the Khwarezmians. Ilya Berkovich put out an amazing article in 2011 and stated that the Syrians were hampered by their need to defend their less mobile Latin allies, and thus the Khwarezmians could outmaneuver them. To be fair to the Syrians, Latin sources give them plenty of credit, stating that they fought hard and bravely, with Al-Mansur of Homs particularly being singled out for his bravado. John of Joinville reported later that the men of Homs only had 280 men left out of the 2,000-strong original contingent. So the Khwarezmians then flanked the Latin centre, and the victorious knights on the Latin right had to cross back across through their confused and worried infantry line to counter the charge. The Khwarezmians, however, completed their encirclement as the infantry got in the way of the knights. Now, the Patriarch and the Constable of Jerusalem, likely because they're on the Latin right, with the feudal levy, managed to be evacuated, and the rest of that wing joined them. However, the military orders in Walter of Brienne were surrounded. Now, it should be worth pointing out that the battle went on for nearly the whole day, and the military orders fought to the death, with Muslim sources giving them the credit for that. Berkovich reckons that around a quarter of the Latin army survived, which I would agree with. But the military orders were absolutely slaughtered. Robert of Nantes, in his letter later calling for aid, said that of the covenants of the House of the Temple, the Hospital of St. John and Holy Mary of the Teutons, only 33 Templars, 26 Hospitallers, and 3 Teutonic brothers escaped, the others being killed or captured. Now, it's worth noting that the military order's leaders were also dealt a pretty heavy blow here. Armand de Perigord died soon afterwards, Guillaume de Chateauneuf was captured, and Conrad of Nassau was killed. Walter of Brienne was also captured and later killed, and his family eventually went through a succession crisis, and they left the Holy Land in 1264. Walter's death is kind of weird, because there's 2 reports of how he died. There's one where he was attacked and murdered by a group of merchants in Cairo, because he attacked their caravans during the Barons' Crusade. And another one is that an emir beheaded him during a game of chess, so pick which one you like. So the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was devastated by this battle, but to be fair, no one involved really came out well. The Syrian Ayyubids were soon conquered by Egypt, and the Egyptian Ayyubids would also soon be overthrown by their Mamluk troops in 1250. The Khwarezmian Turks would also be destroyed outside of Homs in 1246, after they fell out with the Egyptians. The leader of the Mamluks and the Egyptian army at Forbie, Baybars, was also executed soon afterwards by Ayyub for fear that he was working with the Khwarezmians. So as you can see, no one really won here, but the losers were definitely the Crusaders. Forbie remains heavily understudied, however. The lack of figures such as Saladin, Guy de Lusignan, Renaud de Chatillon, as well as the attached Third Crusade, and with Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus, probably plays somewhat into this. But Forbie was important, if not more so than Hattin was, because by the 1240s, the Kingdom of Jerusalem had recovered a significant amount of territory, and was able to field an army almost the same size as the one at Hattin. To be fair, the 13th century in general remains pretty overlooked within crusading historiography, so you can probably guess what I'm going to be recording. So, This has been my first video for this series. I'm probably going to do a series on 13th century crusading. I've just finished my master's thesis on Forbie, and I'm looking at taking a PhD forwards as well within the 13th century. So it's kind of my area of expertise at the moment, and I'm hoping to diffuse that information and knowledge that I've picked up to you guys. So I hope you've all enjoyed this video. I'm sure there's a few things I can probably improve on, and I always take positive feedback in the comments. But I really hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll be coming out with some other things. I'll probably be doing something on the Lombard War, I'll probably do something on Frederick II's Crusade and the Barons' Crusade, and some more 13th century stuff. And then I'll eventually gradually diffuse more into other 13th century and more medieval topics, such as the Vikings and Byzantium. So I'm looking forward to sharing all of these topics with you, and I hope you all enjoy the videos that are to come. I also recommend checking out History of Everything if you're interested in modern history. He does a lot of naval stuff and some stuff about Russia, so go check him out if you're interested in any of that. I do the medieval stuff, he does the modern stuff. He's been a great help to me, and he's a great guy from Australia. He's really funny. I'm sure you'll enjoy his content as well. So until then, guys, wish you a good day, and have a great time. I'll see you around.